What's going on, everyone in Lukman Nation? Hey, how are you doing? It's me, Jackie Lukman, the People's Prophetess, and you are watching People's Power Lunch with me, Jackie Lukman. And if you're watching on Black Power Media, you're watching on the most dangerous platform on social media. And you're watching one of the most dangerous shows on social media. If you're watching through Facebook or Twitter or Twitch or wherever, welcome, thank you, share, like, all that kind of good stuff. Appreciate you for joining today. A lot to get to because a lot has happened in just a day or so. Yet another hearing that the House Select Committee on the investigation of January 6th has held. And once again, more was revealed that was very, very important. We're going to get to that. But before we do, folks, y'all hanging out, filing into the lunchroom. I see Jilla Noreen. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And thank you for becoming a new member. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Lene, what's going on? Good to see you, Comrade P. Deborah Rodriguez, Eugene Mason, Devin Dean, Savvy Sav, Big Teal, Prester John, Nwadi, Lisa Catlett. That's right. Come on in the lunchroom. Let's get started. Courtney, Lucy, hey, what's going on? Very good to see y'all. One of these days, they're going to fix this light in here so it doesn't look like I'm in a dungeon, but I'm literally like in one of the conference rooms in the Sputnik studios, hence the weird, freaky yellow color, orangey color in the background. Not one I would have chosen, but it's the colors of the studio of the network. So yeah, I see more folks have piled into the lunchroom. Ready, revolutionary, Colocratic, what's going on? Good to see y'all. All right, let's get to this. So I have been watching these January 6 hearings that the House Select Committee on the investigation into January 6th have been doing. And I've been saying that pretty consistently. I have not had high expectations for their usefulness, for anything that we needed to pay attention to that they were revealing, but I have been proven incorrect on that on a couple of occasions. And we talked about the first two hearings, the third hearing, but yesterday's hearing was incredibly important in the information that they revealed. Not because of what Trump was implicated in. That's bad enough, because let's not forget, folks, that these hearings that the bipartisan House committee are televising, they are literally just look at the dirt we dug up on Trump. I mean, and there is there this time. There really is. But they are focused on Trump, taking him down, which he should be. But they're, for the Democrats in particular, these hearings are, their long campaign ad, really. And both parties are shoring up this ridiculous, idea of we're defending democracy, right? So understanding that that's what these hearings really are, it helps to not get too carried away with, oh, I wonder what they're going to do about what this person said, or, oh, look at all of the dirt that they reveal here, and I wonder what. This particular committee is not going to do anything about what these people said, because they made it clear from the beginning that they don't have legal authority to recommend charges. They're not going to do that. The Department of Justice does. And as I said before, the Department of Justice is asking for all of the testimony or everything that they have gathered in their investigation. What the DOJ does with it, who knows? But yeah, I think when you understand that these committee hearings and them being televised, a very political move by the Democrats in particular, that I think that should temper some expectations as to what's going to come out of them. And certainly yesterday, what I heard a lot of, not just yesterday, but in the third hearing last week too, in particular, was this whole propping up of this idea of we have to save American democracy, and democracy was threatened, and this group of people, even Republicans, even Trump supporting Republicans, cared about democracy more than they cared about Trump. And that is also a bunch of political cynical drivel being trotted out and supported by the Democratic Party. Because remember, Nancy Pelosi was the one who said she wanted a strong Republican Party. She just didn't want a Trump Republican Party. So, the Democrats are embracing this, rah rah patriotism. We love America. We have to stand up for the Constitution. We have to defend the democracy and the government and all this kind of bullshit, because they're going to wrap their calls for more policing, and more police surveillance and more state surveillance up in the patriotism that they are just throwing up all over the place in these hearings. That's coming, I'm telling you. And they actually made it very clear that that's what they're going to do, because if you notice, if you have been watching, there will be no, other than the law enforcement folks that testified on the first day, this committee is not focusing on the shortcomings of law enforcement that allowed this thing to happen. They're not focusing on all of the information that came out shortly after January 6th that showed that the FBI, the NSA, the Capitol Police, even Metropolitan Police Department, all of the law enforcement agencies that would coordinate with each other, they all knew that there was a credible threat of violence, that violence was being planned. They had the emails, they had the chatter they knew, and they did nothing. This committee is not investigating law enforcement for that. They made that clear on the first day. So, I mean, of course, they're not going to investigate the very people they're going to start shoveling even more money to, right? Yeah. So, yeah, I think it's important to put into context what's going on. Ricky Ryan, I see you finally slid into the lunchroom, uh, um, just in time before we get into the meat. Um, it is important to put these hearings into the context of what they really mean, what purpose they really serve. Not us, not the truth, that not no. um, so that we can regulate our expectations for what's going to come out of them, at least politically. But yesterday's hearing was important, actually, for the very last two people who testified. And I'm going to try to keep this in a straight line, because this is it so much history connects with what happened yesterday. It blew my mind when I looked at all of it. So, first of all, two Black women election workers testified yesterday at the hearing about how Donald Trump and his campaign literally targeted them, specifically targeted the two of them as being like the masterminds of election fraud in Georgia. And I know this is from the griot. I normally wouldn't, I know, but it was handy. So Wandrea Arche Shay Moss and her mom, Ruby Freeman, were actually featured in a video that was a part of the overall surveillance video of the State Farm Arena while the ballot counting was going on after the election. In Georgia, the ballots were counted in State Farm Arena. And if you remember, there was some controversy about the ballot counting that night because there was a water main break or there was a burst pipe that actually did happen. The election workers get to the arena preparing to count the ballots, and there was this massive leak of water coming from the ceiling that had to be cleaned up. So the counting of the ballots had to be delayed. The Trump campaign said that that was a lie. It didn't happen. It actually did. So then they got that cleaned up, and everybody goes in. They're starting to count the ballots. So there is surveillance video of the whole operation. So all of the lies are coming out about the ballots being counted in Georgia, and this is Shay Moss, and this is the picture that I was looking for. There we go. That's the picture that I was looking for. The two of them at the hearing yesterday. This is Shay Moss, and this is her mother, Ruby Freeman. So all of these lies that were coming out about Georgia in particular, if you remember, that there was some controversy. Oh, it was fraud because the vote counting started late. Well, the vote counting started late because there really was a water main break. Then there were allegations of illegal ballots pulled out of a suitcase under tables that were for Biden that were counted. And that's where these two women come in, because the entire vote counting operation in State Farm Arena was captured on surveillance video. They had election monitors there. The Trump campaign lied about things being done, the election monitors being told to leave. That never happened on the video. They are absolutely there. So these two women were singled out by the Trump administration using a snippet, a clip of that surveillance video of the whole election night counting operation. On December 3rd, when Rudy Giuliani, when the Trump campaign had a hearing with Georgia lawmakers on December 3rd in 2020, they used that little clip of surveillance video showing Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman, Shay Moss and her mom, Ruby Freeman, who had taken a part-time job to help with the election. Shay Moss has worked for the Election Commission in Fulton County, Georgia for 10 years, so that was her job. They used a snippet of these two women doing their job, regular stuff, and claimed that they were the ones who counted illegal ballots for Biden. And this is how they did it. So at this hearing on December 3rd with Georgia lawmakers, a volunteer in the Trump organization, an attorney, Jackie Pick, said that the two Fulton County election workers, they were not named at the time, pulled ballots for Biden out of suitcases hidden under the counting tables and illegally counted them. Trump said several times they ran them through the counting machines over and over and over again. The suitcases are actually like standard secure bins that ballots are stored inside tamper-proof bags when counting is not completed, and those ballots that are stored in the bins have to be counted when counting resumes, right? So the ballots were taken out of the bins, as was seen in the videotape, because the election workers thought that at the end of the night, like around 11:30 or midnight, they were about to go home. They thought they were going to go home and then come back the next day and finish counting, which has happened before. So they're packing everything up. They put the ballots that had not been counted in the secure, tamper proof bag, and then they put the bag of uncounted ballots in the secure bin underneath the counting table with the expectation they're going to go home. They get word from the Secretary of State that nope, we're not stopping. We're going to work through the night. We're going to keep counting. So everybody has to take all their stuff out. And in the larger video, in the investigation into these allegations, in the whole video, you see people like putting their coats on and getting their lunch bags and getting ready to go home. And then you see an election worker come in, and you can see like his posture is like, I don't even want to tell these people that they are not going home, but he does tell them, we're not leaving. We have to finish counting. Keep going. So at that point, that is the point at which the uncounted ballots are taken out of the bin so that they can then be counted. And they are run through the machine more than once, the counting machine more than once for accuracy. The investigation proved that the allegations of fraud in Georgia were absolutely false. And even the Republicans in Georgia, I'll give them credit for this much, but this is it. Even the Republicans in Georgia admitted that there was no basis for these allegations. None of that mattered to Trump and his team. So Jackie Pick at that December 30th hearing identified the two women as the lady with the blonde braids, which is Shay Moss, and the older woman with the name of Ruby on her shirt, and that was her mom, Ruby Freeman. And Ruby wore this signature T-shirt with Lady Ruby on it because that's the name people knew her by in her community, and have been calling her Lady Ruby because she is a women's clothing store owner that caters to women with particular tastes, right? So she's beloved in her community. They call her, like, excuse me, Lady Ruby. She has these T-shirts in every color with the name Lady Ruby on them. So that's how Jackie Pick identified these people. Didn't name them, but that's how she identified them in this December 3rd hearing. Then the next week, in another hearing, Rudy Giuliani names them. These two Black women, out of all of the election workers there, they picked these two Black women, and Rudy Giuliani names them in a hearing in the next week on December 10th as he's showing the clip of the video of them retrieving the uncounted ballots, going back to work to continue counting, but accusing them of uh, election fraud, calling them crooks who obviously stole votes, is what he said. He falsely claimed that the video showed that the women were engaging in surreptitious illegal activity and that they were, get this, acting suspiciously like drug dealers passing out dope. That's what Rudy Giuliani said about these two Black women election workers in Georgia after he called their names out in this hearing. Then, in a telephone call with Brad Raffensperger, who was the Georgia Secretary of State at the time in January 2021, Donald Trump repeatedly called these two women's names on that call as he is demanding that Raffensperger find 11,800 votes to overturn the 11,000 votes that he accused these two women of illegally counting for Biden. He called Ruby Freeman's name in this call 18 times, calling her a known political operative, accusing her and her daughter of fraud, calling them professional vote scammers and hustlers. Donald Trump said this about these women in this call with Brad Raffensperger. All of these lies about these two Black women election workers were repeated and expanded upon in right-wing media outlets like One America News and the Gateway Pundit. And even Republican election officials got in on the vilification of these two Black women, with Congressman Jody Heiss retweeting the bullshit video, taken completely out of context, with the comment, "caught on candid camera, say it with me, FRAUD." All right? So these people created an entire fabrication of a stolen election in Georgia, targeting these two Black women election workers. And you know what happened next, right? Trump's rabid racist mob went after those two women. Their addresses were posted on social media platforms and on Parler, the right wing, yeah, including the address of the 70-plus-year-old matriarch of the family. They all began receiving threatening, racist messages on their cell phones and their emails on social media. Strangers started showing up to their house, banging on their door, threatening them with jail, arrest, jail, and worse. Shay Moss's sons were targeted with violent, racist text messages. Trump supporters even showed up at Moss's grandmother's home, their 70-plus-year-old matriarch, and tried to force their way into that woman's house, demanding that she tell them where the other two women were, Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman, so that they could make a false a citizen's arrest of them. So yesterday, Shay Moss, accompanied by her mother, Ruby Freeman, testified to all of this at the hearing. And of course, her testimony was emotional. And it was, she didn't even go into detail about everything that happened. To get a full picture of what really, like, some of the details of what happened with this campaign of terror um, that Trump supporters unleashed upon these two women. I have to find the article. There's an article that Reuters did that's very extensive. Let me see. Where's? Let me find it. Here it is. To really get a clear idea of what these women went through, you have to read that article. Because it does go into much more detail about the terrorism that these two women experienced. But it also goes into detail about how the police didn't do anything about it, even though they reported the threats and showed them the texts and emails threatening them, and filed police reports and all that kind of stuff. But here's why I bring this up. Here's why I bring this up. That committee had a unique opportunity to confront the history of racist terrorism and fascism in the complicity of law enforcement in not protecting Black people in particular from that racist violence. When Shay Moss raised one particular threat that was leveled against her and her family, when she testified, she said that people, all the threats were violent, but many of them were obviously racist. And she said they would say things like, "Be glad it's 2020 and not 1920. And those two should be strung up from the nearest lamppost and set on fire." Now, I would have thought, and I'm not giving these people a whole lot of credit for being decent. I'm just thinking that, you know, if someone throws you an alley-oop like that, it's like that threat. Be glad it's 2020 and not 1920. And the reference to lynching in front of a bunch of politicians, legislators, whatever, you would think that would be the perfect opportunity for these people to say, and this is why we have to continually combat the history of racist violence in this country because it's connected to, but they didn't. They didn't. Nobody addressed the very specific threats referencing lynching of Black people in connection to voting and voting rights that was raised in these women's testimony. So in on one hand, I was like, I'm really glad that these women testified so we could see how far just it wasn't just the cops. It wasn't just the cops on Capitol Hill that these folks were fine with assaulting. They were just fine with threatening and assaulting Black people and elderly Black people at that. They didn't care. So I was glad that those women testified to expose that this idea that, oh, Trump supporters are just patriots, and there's no, they're a bunch of fucking violent racist thugs, and they've proven that. I think that testimony proved that. On the other hand, in regard to the way the committee responded to that testimony, it was so clear that the only reason those women were there was to implicate Trump, not to implicate the system that all of this happens in, not to implicate the history that the threats those women endured is connected to, and the fact that we're still living in that type of environment today. Which leads me to believe, well, not believe because I already know, but I feel like that was just like evidence, proof that Democrats, I don't expect the Republicans who through gerrymandering, voter suppression, closing polls, even attacking churches' souls to the polls efforts on Sundays. I didn't expect the Republicans to say anything about that because the only difference between between what they do and what Trump supporters were willing to do is that the Trump supporters were honest. I mean, they were honest about it from the get. They were like, we will kill you to make sure you don't vote, to make sure you don't mess around with our Fuhrer not being reelected. The Republicans just use the law to do it. That's the only difference. It's the only difference. So I didn't expect the Republicans, any Republican on that panel, to raise the historical connection and the significance of those threats being lodged against those women at the time. Yeah. But the Democrats, to me, that just showed how complicit they are in this system, especially when you got Black ass Benny Thompson sitting there as the chairman of the committee. He doesn't raise it. He doesn't raise the issue. Instead, he goes to, oh, we thank you. We're so sorry that you went through this. And we thank you so much, for your service to your state and to your country and to democracy. What democracy? I mean, how do you hold a hearing if you're not complicit in the fascism that is targeted, directed at Black folks in particular? How do you not respond to the same kind of racist threats being lodged at Black people in 2022 that were carried out against Black people in 1920? In how about in 1865? And the kind of violent terrorism that ended Reconstruction. How do you not make that connection? How do you not make the connection between the threats of lynching these Black women and other Black election workers that were threatened. Yes, other election workers in general were threatened, but the threats of lynching, yeah, that was directed at the Black lynching, but the Black election workers. These two Black women in particular. How do you not connect the threat of lynching with the violence of Red Summer 1919? How do you not connect the threat of lynching that these women endured, the racist terrorism that these women endured, with the long history of lynching after 1919, from through the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s? How do you not make that connection? And you're sitting there, an elected official. How do you not make the connection unless you're not interested in interrogating and confronting the fascism and the racism that this very system is built on? Because there's no way that this system cannot be built on the very things these women experienced if it happened exactly this way in history, and it's happening exactly this way now. The only difference is those women found a way to survive. The mama had to move out of her home and move in with friends, and then they found out where her friends were, and they started threatening her friends. So they asked her to leave, and that's a whole nother show. We got to you're not going to threaten me into not protecting a member of my community. Come for me. See what happened. That's another show. But Shay Moss quit her job, a job that she loved, quit her job, couldn't leave the house, was afraid to give out her information, didn't want her name called in public, wouldn't go to the grocery store because she didn't know who was around her. They called the police over and over again. The police wouldn't do anything. So what is it like for these two Black women to have endured this racist terrorism that was unleashed by Trump and his campaign of collaborators in this lie that targeted them, to report these incidents to the police and to have the police do nothing, and then to testify at a hearing where the elected officials who are conducting the hearing said at the very beginning of the hearings that they weren't going to focus on how law enforcement didn't respond to the very credible threat they had at least a week before January 6th even happened. What the hell was that like? And then to add insult to injury, folks, to add insult to injury, where this was an easy moment for anybody on that committee to raise those historical issues and to exercise, or at least begin, make an attempt, make an effort, act like, pretend, put on the facade of attempting to exercise the demons of racism and fascism directed at Black people to keep us from being fully enfranchised as citizens in that moment. Then the insult to injury was when I found out that hearing yesterday was held on the day that James Chaney, Michael Schwerner, and Andrew Goodman were tortured and murdered by the KKK in Neshoba County, Mississippi in 1964. Why? Why were they murdered by the KKK? For registering Black people to vote. Look, I'm not the smartest person in this studio. I'm not even the smartest person on the team of my show, and there's three of us. I recognize that. But damn, y'all, how did they not take the opportunity of literally the date? Nobody said Nobody said, you know what? And on this date in particular, we have to redouble our efforts to ensure that people are not continue to be subjected to violations of their person, their humanity, their safety in the pursuit of their exercising their right to vote and participate in the electoral. No, these smart people with the degrees and the six-figure salaries and the cushy offices and the lifetime pensions that you and I pay for and the free health care that you and I pay for, they couldn't even be bothered to look up the damn date that they held the hearing on, that these two Black women came and testified about the racial terrorism that they endured because of Donald Trump and his lies about a stolen election. They couldn't even bother to honor the history of our continued struggle against fascism and racism in this country. Why? Because they're complicit. They're complicit. They're about to go on this tough on crime campaign, the Democrats are, because they still want to reach out to those disaffected Trump voters, the same people who in Cobb County, Georgia, and in Fulton County, Georgia, have not been arrested for the terrorist campaign they unleashed on Shay Moss and Ruby Freeman. No, as far as I know, none of the people who were involved in that campaign of terror against those women have been arrested, held accountable, nothing. The two women did sue One America News and the Gateway Pundit for defaming them. And even though the CEO of One America News at one point, I can't remember his name, and I don't want to call it if I did, laughed about the lawsuit, like, oh, ha, 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 it'll go away. I'm just laughing at it because 4 other people are suing it. You know what happened? They settled with those women. They gave them their money. So that mug ain't laughing now. And the amount of money was undisclosed. Unfortunately, it was not enough to bankrupt those bastards, but the lawsuits were settled with One America News and the Gateway Pundit. I don't know if they issued any retractions or apologies. I'm sure they didn't. It wouldn't make any difference, but I certainly hope that the amount of money those women got makes it possible for them and every single person in their families to never work again a day in their fucking lives, because they deserve it. I don't know if they are suing Rudy Giuliani, this person, Jackie Pack, what is this person's name? The one who initially called them the Trump attorney. Jackie Pick. I don't know if they're suing them. I don't know if they're suing Donald Trump and everybody who was involved in defaming them and making them the target of this this campaign of lies. I hope they do, but I don't know if they are. Excuse me. I do know that the two women are still basically in hiding. Excuse me. Because they are afraid, for their lives. And it was very difficult for them to come to the hearing. And in the videotape testimony that Ruby Freeman gave, she said, do you know what it's like to have the President of the United States target you? Yeah, we do, Mrs. Freeman. That's the thing. And I'm not going to criticize these women for believing in a system that has never, ever in its existence believed in us, because it was never, ever in its creation created for us. But yes, we do know what it's like to have the President of the United States target us, because every president of the United States has done precisely that with the policies and the legislation and the support for the police, no matter how many of us they kill. Yeah, that's what they do. But this was different. This was different because the president at the time falsely accused these two Black women of a crime that they did not commit, obviously, but made them the targets for his racist lynch mob. That's what they were. And it's a damn shame. It is a damn shame, and it's a crime that not one person on that House committee panel called that out. So that's what I got to say about that. Ricky makes a great point. I don't know if it's a criticism of the women, but it is a larger criticism of the colonized conditions we are under that makes us respond with overt patriotism. That's absolutely true. It's absolutely true, and it is. So we see this. We see the testimony of people. We see the testimony of Ruby Freeman, and she said, I'm an American. It's like, Miss Freeman, I love you. I struggle for your safety. I don't just pray for your safety. I struggle for your safety. I want your safety. I actively work for your safety. But I want you and your daughter and your family to realize that you're not an American, because if you were, you would not have been subjected to the terrorism that you were subjected to. Yeah. All right. So Monday, I did a stream and we were talking about something. I don't know what the hell we were talking about anymore, but we were talking about slavery, and there were comments made about all of the Africans who were complicit in the slave trade, and how the Caribbean islands were plantations, and I didn't say anything about that. And, I need to be talking about all the Africans who sold other Africans into slavery. Here's why I don't engage in that kind of discourse. And I hope that I have queued this up to the correct place, because I think this is very common sense and a no-nonsense way of looking at the relationship between colonizer and the colonized. Okay, I hope I got this in the right place. We fitting to find out, huh? Ain't we?
Now you can do that every month forever. The economy doesn't change because the economy is not how much money. The economy, as someone says, is the productive capacity of the people.
All right, here it comes.
Now this is not a new revelation. This revelation goes back to Adam Smith. The wealth of nations. What Adam Smith was arguing was against a system called mercantilism. Mercantilism was a system. The philosophy was that the wealth of the nation depended on the amount of gold or money in the royal treasury. This was the dominant economic system in Europe. It caused a number of consequences in Europe. For example, from about 1350 to 1450, it caused the 100 Years' Wars in Europe, because there's only so much gold. And if I get more of it, you get less of it.
Mm-hmm.
And so countries were fighting each other to see who was going to control the flow of gold. Right?
Wow.
Then it also unleashed imperialism and colonialism on the world.
Oh, wow.
Because out of that 100 years of Europeans fighting each other, they perfected and improved their weaponry, their weapons of war, so that when they broke out of Europe to other parts of the world, they had the weapons to subdue other people. Not because they were smarter, it's just because they had 100 years of fighting each other that they had better weapons. But then they said, well, we don't have to fight each other for gold. We'll go down to South America and we'll take
Just
all their
steal
gold.
theirs.
We just steal their gold. We go, and so they started this process of bringing gold into Europe on the idea that the wealth of nations was about how much gold. So mercantilism leads to colonialism and enslavement. Now the Wealth
Wealth
of
of
Nations,
Nations,
Adam
Adam
Smith, was
Smith, was
published in
published in
1776, and
1776, and
that
that
date
date
is
is
not
not
coincidental.
coincidental.
I hope you understood that. I hope you got that. The connection between the Hundred Years' War in Europe, where European nations for 100 years were fighting each other. And over that 100 years, they advanced and perfected weapons of war. They made war more efficient. And they're using these perfected weapons against each other, but then they kind of ran out of resources to fight over among each other. So they took their advanced weapons of war to other places in the global south, on the continent of Africa. And they subdued those populations with those advanced weapons of war and took their resources and enslaved people. So this is why no creative experiments. Clearly, the Hundred Years' War was not fought over a Bible. It was literally fought over gold, control of resources. Y'all, please pay attention. Europeans were fighting each other over the little bit of resources they had in Europe, which wasn't a lot. The thing that they were able to develop, the one thing they were able to develop, because they didn't have resources to sustain themselves, were weapons of war. And they used those advanced weapons of war that they were tired of fighting each other for, because they didn't have anything else to fight each other over that they could use to propel one kingdom over the other. They had to use those weapons of war to go get resources from somewhere else. No more resources in Europe. Where else were the resources? Global South and in Africa, where people, of course, engaged in conflict, but did not have weapons of war as advanced as the Europeans. Why? Because people in other places just did not go to war for 100 damn years straight, solid, like the Europeans did with each other. So when we talk about Africans selling Africans, and, you know, plantations in the Caribbean, and we need to talk about that. We really need to understand the context in which European colonizers engaged with the people whose resources, whether material or human, they stole. These were not agreements of equal powers. These were not mutually beneficial agreements between the Europeans or the Portuguese and the people they were exploiting. So imagine Europeans come to a coastal African kingdom. No yipper. Africans did not give them the gold. I'm literally sitting here telling y'all that everything was taken by force, by a militarily superior force. Lord have mercy. It's like I have a house and I have foodstuffs. Neighborhood is starving, and people come and ask me to give them food, and I say no. But then another group of people from another neighborhood with a cannon comes and they send an emissary, nice, uh, um, outfit, very polite, seeming to be respectful, but the whole time the cannon is pointed at my house. The whole time the emissary is appearing to talk nicely to me and appearing to make a deal with me. The cannon is pointed at my house. And if I'm looking at the emissary and looking over their shoulder, I see how nice they are, but I see that cannon. And I know that if I don't agree to whatever it is this person is politely asking me to give them, I am going to get the cannon. That was the relationship between the colonizers and the colonized. That was the relationship. So when people talk about, we all like to talk about how, Africans on the continent were so advanced. It's true in some areas, but in weaponry, they were not as advanced as the Europeans were because they really had no need to be, because they were not at war amongst themselves for 100 years like the Europeans were. Whew, boy. You know, BB Rodriguez, you were the one who made those comments. You were the one that made the comments about, I need to condemn the Africans who sold our people into slavery. This is actual history. So I don't know what about being met with a superior military force and facing the threat of military annihilation if you don't go along with the colonizers' plan. I don't know what about that is so difficult. But let me say this. Let me say this. Let's just say there were 2 or 3 African leaders who were like, cool, I don't like them people nowhere. Take them. That's 2 or 3 African leaders out of a continent of hundreds of millions of people. And that's also 2 or 3 African leaders out of a continent of leaders who actually did try to resist the colonizers, fight and tried to fight as much as they could, but they could not overcome the military power of the people they were fighting. That's history. I don't know. I don't know what I don't know what else you want me to say about it, but that's history. So that's why I am not going to sit here, um, and go along with the colonizers' line about, well, we didn't kidnap Africans. Africans sold other Africans into slavery. There's a reason they do that. There is a reason, there's a reason they shift the responsibility off to the colonized, because they don't want to be identified as the colonizers. They don't want to take the responsibility as the colonizers. And here we are sitting here going right along with the colonizers, blaming the colonized for their position. Now, it's absolutely true that today there are comprador leaders on the continent, as there are in some nations in the global South. But again, we're talking about a few people out of hundreds of millions who are struggling against ongoing imperialism and neocolonialism. So, at what point are we going to put our focus in this struggle where it belongs, on the people who are responsible for colonialism, neocolonialism, and imperialism. When we gonna do that? Instead of sitting here talking about we need to talk about all of the Africans who sold other Africans. That is a false narrative. It's a white supremacist imperialist narrative, and I ain't never ever in my life gonna be the one to sign on to that narrative. And if that makes me a problem, then I am. I sure is. So that's what I got today. And I guess I could think of some other smart, snarky things to say. Oh boy. mm. Like it's weird. It's like this blame. Mm. First of all, I feel like people need to read a whole lot more Black revolutionaries. People need to read a whole lot more Thomas Sankara. People need to read Samora Machel. People need to read, damn it, read Walter Rodney. What the hell? I don't understand how you come away from reading. How do you read How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney and not understand why this both sides are complicit? It was both sides. Africans sold it. How? That's how I know you haven't read it. So yeah, I would implore people. Let me help some folks. Oh, I'm not gonna give you the Amazon link. No, because we support workers here. There you go. You can click on that link, and I like thrift books, or that's Abe Books also, but I also like thrift books. Abe Books, I think that's how you pronounce it, is a used bookseller. I dig them. They have a lot of titles that are hard to find sometimes. If you have never read How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney, before you open your mouth ever again talking about what Africans did or did not do in regard to the human trafficking crime against humanity, you need to go buy and read that book. Then come back and tell me what you got to say about what Africans did and did not do. Oh, Jesus Christ. Anyway, all right, folks. That's today's People's Power Lunch with Jackie Lupman. I'm going to keep the rest of my snarky comments to myself because I need to go eat lunch. I need to get better at eating regular meals because I've gotten off that, and it's really bad for me because of the beans issue. So I need to be better with eating regular meals. So I'm gonna go grab something good to eat. And I have my water. I'm gonna drink my water. I hope you were drinking your water. I hope you had something good to eat. I hope this lunch was filling and nutritious, and it left you with a good, full feeling. And today is, well, what is today? I don't know. I don't even know what today is anymore. Wednesday. Um, and I think maybe I might do another People's Power Lunch tomorrow. We'll see what's going on. Did you not see the link? I think yeah, Facebook is I was bad on Facebook, so I'm on a 31-hour ban. So if you're watching through Facebook, you probably didn't see it, but you can go to Abe Books, A-B like boy, ebooks.com, and just search for How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. There you go. Yes, Jose, this is a sort of regularly scheduled program, at least 2 or 3 days a week during the week at 1 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Um, Let me see before I go. Mm. Okay, BB Rodriguez, you can have your what if moments. I tell you what, I'm not going to ask you what your thoughts are on if women are complicit in their own rape, or if assault victims are complicit in their own assault, because clearly with your line of thinking they kind of are. So do you, dude, whatever. Oh, exactly, goddess. People believe in the lies of white supremacy and claiming they're going to get reparations. I so confused, so very confused. And by the way, don't just read, don't just stop at how Europe underdeveloped Africa. Also read Groundings um, by Walter Rodney. Read everything by Walter Rodney. Read you some Thomas Sankara, everyone. The speeches by Samora Machel. Read about Claudia Jones. There are so many noteworthy Black revolutionary leaders who have written extensively about the exploitative, oppressive relationship, if you want to call it that, between European nations and people on the continent. The only way people are confused about the nature of that relationship is that they have never read anything those people have written and literally don't care about anything those people have said. So Prester John said, also support SO1 Books, a small Black-owned bookseller with insanely incredible titles. Ooh, I'm going to check them out. Thank you so much. All right, folks. Oh yeah, yes, Devin. Thanks for pointing that out. Rodney's essays are also just incredibly, and check out the Walter Rodney Foundation also, folks. Let me give you that too. Where there is like literally ongoing, continuing education about Walter Rodney's works, his impact, everything work carried on by his wife, who is a revolutionary in her own right, dealing with nutrition and health, and others' amazing work. All right, I'm going to go get lunch. Hope you really enjoyed this People's Power Lunch with me, Jackie Lukman. Tune in tomorrow, I think at 1 o'clock, and we'll chop it up over something else. Until then, a luta continua. The struggle continues. But Victoria acerta. Victory is certain. Take care, y'all. Peace.